On today's episode of Wengel's Workshop, I'll be making my first knife from W2 steel. Now you may ask yourself, why W2? Well, there's a guy named Jared Ball, or J-Ball Knives on Instagram, who makes some of the most insanely Hamon knives that I've ever seen. So this knife is inspired by Jared Ball, and I decided that if I'm going to work on my Hamons, I might as well do it using the best steel to bring out the best Hamons. Now, I would have liked to have forged this knife. However, the W2 that I was able to purchase, which I got from Pop's Knife Supply, was a little bit thinner than I would have liked to forge on with my limited forging experience. So I decided that I'll just stick to stock removal this time and try to do my best job on the Hamon that I can. So far, I've roughed out the knife with a grinding wheel, and I'm going to bring it over to the grinder to dial in the profile. So now I'll go ahead and center punch my pinholes and a couple of weight reduction holes. Now for reducing weight in the handle, I've actually kind of changed my approach. Rather than drilling a bunch of weight reduction holes, I'm just going to go ahead and drill 2 weight reduction holes. And then I will put fullers on both sides of the handle. And then I'll use a grinding wheel to come back and connect the 2 center holes to basically hollow out the center of that handle and reduce as much weight as possible. In the future, a more skilled way that I would like to learn to reduce the weight of the tang is by creating a tapered tang, where essentially the tang thins more and more and more till you get to the end of the handle, and this reduces a tremendous amount of weight in the knife and really helps balance it out. Now before I grind the bevels, I'll go ahead and surface grind the flats of the knife up to 150 grit. This is just going to make things easier in the future. Now I'll go ahead and rough in the main bevel and the false bevels on the grinder prior to heat treatment. I will definitely leave some thickness on the edge and these sort of things because you don't want to thin it out too much prior to heat treating it. Now, as always, I finish up the false bevels by draw filing them, as it's very hard to get them perfect on the grinder. So now the knife is cleaned up and ready for heat treatment. I actually went ahead and did 2 normalization cycles and then cleaned the knife up again because you can't leave that forge scale on since I'm going to do a Hamon. The clay that I used is from Pop's Knife Supply, and I'm no expert at Hamons, but the one tip that I'll give is that I believe both sides of the clay should really match up almost identically to make sure that it's insulated on both sides equally. I didn't get footage of the quench, but for the heat treatment, I followed an article I found on NordicEdge.com. I will heat the knife until it's non-magnetic and maybe just a hair hotter. You really don't want to allow it to get over 1500 degrees. And then I will go ahead and quench it in Parks 50 after letting it soak for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then for the temper, it recommended 450 degrees for two 2-hour cycles. I felt like that may be a little bit hot, so I stuck with about 430, and it really came out good. It quenched very hard, and it seems to hold an edge well. Now for the handle, I'll be using some material that I bought from Oleg at knifewood.com. I cut the block down and added these micarta and G10 inlays. So now it's time to clean up the knife again and finish grinding the bevels. I'll start by surface grinding the flats up to 150 again, and then I will go ahead and grind the bevels out and thin that edge down. The people over at QFun were nice enough to send me this digital caliper. It's something that I've needed for a long time and I've just kind of been putting it off, but it's really nice to have one. And I haven't integrated it fully into my process yet, but I'm going to show you one use for it here, and that's making sure that your bevels are going to line up pretty evenly and match on both sides. The Amazon link for this caliper will be in the description of the video. Once the knife is finished being cleaned up on the grinder, I'll go ahead and hand sand the knife up to 1000 grit, and then I will etch it in ferric chloride acid. Once the knife is finished being etched, I will polish it with 1500 grit silicon carbide powder mixed with 3-in-1 oil, and I'll do that using a makeup remover cotton swab. So now with all that done, the knife is ready for scales. I'll go ahead and drill the pinholes out in the scales, and then I will profile them to the knife. And then the last thing I'll do is add the bevels where the scales meet the blade, because it's hard to bevel these once these scales are glued onto the knife. To glue the scales to the knife, I will be using West Systems G-Flex epoxy. To shape the handle, I'll start off by giving it a bit of a Coke bottle shape, and then I'm going to try to leave the handle faceted. I didn't get the whole process recorded, but you'll see when I hand sand it that I basically didn't round everything over. I tried to leave as many facets on the handle as possible because it's a skill that I'd like to develop. For the finish on the handle, I'll be using York's Wax. It's an organic and chemical-free product, which are two things that I appreciate. I have limited experience with it, so I'll hold off on my opinion until I've used it a bit more, but it did seem to leave a nice finish on the handle. So here's the knife with the sheath that I made for it. The sheath is made from Kydex, and it's a taco style sheath, and the belt loop is also made from Kydex. I rivet the belt loop together, which prevents the belt loop essentially from ever breaking. However, you can't just clip it on and off your belt very quickly, which is, the downside of that. Now to sharpen the knife, I will be using this T-Sproff K03 model sharpening system. They were kind enough to send me the sharpening system and a whole set of diamond stones. It really is a beautiful system. I have very limited use of it, so I'm not going to do like a full review in this video, but the one thing I'll say is that it's really easy to set up and use, and it's built very well. So probably for my next video in a couple weeks, I'll be putting out a full review on this sharpening system. Like I said, it's not cheap, but man, it's really nice and it's easy to use, and it sharpened the knife really beautifully. So be on the lookout for that review if you're interested in purchasing a high-end sharpening system. I'll have the link to it in my description. I'll put the Amazon link as well as a link to the direct website. Once I was done going through the diamond stones, I'll go ahead and strap the knife on my leather belt, and then the knife will be nice and beautifully sharp. So here's the final-ish product, and I say that because there's still a couple things I need to clean up, specifically where the secondary bevel meets the plunge line, as well as a couple other minor things. But overall, I'm very happy with my first W2 knife. The quench came out great, and the Hamon looks beautiful, and I definitely know how to improve the Hamon next time. And also I'll be able to improve the facets on the handle next time and bring them out a little bit more. So overall, I'm happy with it, and I learned a ton. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to be notified when I upload new videos, hit that notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching. Go follow me on Instagram.